Hello and welcome to another Office Hours capsule. That's right, capsule. Call them capsules because they're little sections. I say little. Look at the look at the live streams for Office Hours, because it's small bits of the Office Hours live stream that I pull out to turn into standalone videos for you to watch in case you don't have time to watch a 3 to 4 hour live stream and just want to have some of this information. What I also do for sure is every time CIG does a monthly report for Squadron and Squadron 42 and Star Citizen, I do a standalone video talking about them every month. So if you follow these month to month, you can see the progression of how Star Citizen and Squadron 42 are being developed. As always, I don't know if this is good or not. I don't know if you're enjoying these or not. If you are, make sure that you're subscribed and hitting that little bell icon to make sure you can watch this. You'll see this is live. I'm live on Twitch and YouTube. You can watch us live as well if you want to join us and ask questions about the lore, about the gameplay, about pretty much anything you want about Star Citizen or more. On Thursdays at 9 p.m. Eastern, Eastern US, twitch.tv/theastropub or youtube.com/theastropub live. And again, I always do these, so you may have watched me from way long ago. Double check to make sure you subscribe, because we've moved this to a new channel called TheAstroPub Live, or just TheAstroPub if it's on YouTube in general. Make sure you subscribe, because we're kind of building that back up from scratch. YouTube asked me, YouTube was hurting the growth for both of my stuff, so I had to move them to 2 separate channels. Just still catching a lot of people coming back from that, so. Without any further ado, let's look at what CIG has done in Squadron 42 this month. This is pre-recorded. It's not pre-recorded, Blizz. Well, I guess it is. If you're watching this on YouTube, it is pre-recorded, but it was recorded live. All right, June 2022, Squadron 42 monthly report. A little bigger. This is a cross post from the report that was recently sent out via the monthly Squadron 42 newsletter. We're publishing this a second time as a com link to make it easier for the community to reference back to. Two Squadron 42 recruits. Subject development update 7622. Reference CIG UK, CIG DE, CIG LA, and CIG TX. FAO Squadron 42 recruits. Welcome to June's Squadron 42 development report. Enclosed, you will find details on the latest progress made across the campaign, including updates to human combat, Volt weaponry, and spaceflight mechanics. Thank you for your continued support of Squadron 42. Sincerely, CIG Communications. AI content. Last month, AI content began their work at the Master of Arms behavior, which uses the same AI as the bartender, but interacts with different usables and plays other dialogue options. Supporting Squadron 42's numerous weapons and other varying shapes and size requirements requires an extensive catalog of assets. Earlier in the year, the team were pleased with the results of the mocap redelivery that led to the clear improvements in Graves and Kelly's movement cycles. Last month, they continued the process for the remaining core cast characters. These assets had not been worked on for some time, so required updates to meet the desired fidelity. The landing officer is now finished and integrated into the chapter flow. The role of this AI is to help the player land safely and correctly oriented on the landing pad, with the character animations playing to assist with positional and rotational changes. This routine can now be viewed on the ship's cockpit display, as solely seeing the AI through the cockpit visor proved challenging. Lastly, AI content received essential bug fixes from AI tech to allow movements of trolleys from multiple alignment points. The AI can now wheel a diagnostic cart towards and away from the Gladius when it lands. This has allowed the team to conclude their work on this part of the deck crew behavior. So what we're seeing from AI from Squadron 42 this month is a lot of the core characters. I believe Graves and Kelly are crew members. I don't think they're pilots. We've heard Kelly before mentioned in the Moro tour. but I don't remember who they are. They could also be the CEO. I don't know if the CEO is named Kelly. But we also are seeing a lot of deck crew being worked on. They've fully worked out so that you can have the landing officer telling you where to land. It's the crew on an aircraft carrier who kind of signal to the pilots how to move and when they're ready to launch. I believe they're yellow helmets. I can't remember exactly. I think that's what they're referencing. And yeah, you can't always see from your cockpit view where you're landing depending where you are, so it looks like they're having a little bit of the HUD going to be extrapolated out so you can see them going like, you know, move left, move right, whatever the hand signals will do. So. And also trolleys to be pushed up for diagnostics carts so that they can fix your ships and such. AI features. Last month, on the human combat side, AI features began implementing a logic selection for different attack archetypes: defender, pusher, and strafer. The defender chooses a position to attack from and remains there until cover is compromised or no longer valid, e.g. the target is out of range or no longer visible. The pusher is more active, rapidly closing the distance between them and the target in order to build pressure. The strafer is more tactical archetype, choosing lateral position outside the direction of the target is aiming in to set up flanking opportunities. This is important because this behavior can be transformed into behavior we will see AI in Star Citizen do sooner once this has been implemented in Squadron. Each NPC can select an attack archetype that they determine will be the best for that situation based on multiple criteria. These criteria will include the range of the weapon that the AI holds. Example, characters with short-range weapons prefer the pusher archetype. How many characters are attacking the target, and how many other characters are using a particular archetype. Each criterion gives a certain score for each archetype that's used as a weight when randomly choosing between the archetypes. This supports variation, reaction to different situations, and some intelligence in the makeup of archetypes in any given situation. Tasks from last month involved implementing each of the criteria scoring functions and the system for summing these and weighing the archetype selection. For human combat, work went into perception, cover, and movement animations for the female skeleton. This is in pursuit of completing the set so that characters with the female skeleton can perform the same combat maneuvers as the male skeleton. Work continued on the implementation of the new weapon accuracy system mentioned in previous reports. Last month, the prototype was set up. This feature features debug visualization of the percentage chance calculated from different factors, which will allow designers to easily tweak accuracy to balance difficulty. All right, so it looks like if you set a higher difficulty, they'll be more accurate, and if you set a lower difficulty for Squadron 42, they'll be more inaccurate when they're firing at you. It's an interesting way of balancing it. For the Vanduul, the team took advantage of the tech described in April's report and merged the Vanduul and human master graphs, the top-level state machine that controls AI behavior for characters. This should make the system far easier to maintain, while also allowing for specific behaviors for unique characters. They also selected and processed the animation generated in last month's mocap sessions, including bespoke animations for a section of stealth gameplay. Very interesting. So a lot of the features have been added together to make it, they're basically kind of taking the Vanduul. They're just coming off of a large sprint working on Vanduul melee and like attack systems. And now they've been starting to work on this human attack pattern. And I think they're getting that done as well. But the Vanduul are pretty nasty. They described in previous monthly reports of the Vanduul doing a backslash attack, where if you get too close from behind and they know you're there, they will swing backwards with their spear and hit you. And the way they're describing it, I was like, oh, they're just doing Dark Souls. You're going to be fighting Dark Souls bosses and in space is what you're going to be doing. So, but they're still different. The Vanduul and human behaviors are going to be different, but they're now all on the same kind of architecture. AI tech. June saw AI tech prototyping a set of fauna behaviors. Animals. focusing on implementation of the entity class, verifying that all the components can function correctly on creatures. They're currently setting up animations, an initial version of the base B-Space, a basic creature roaming behavior, and a basic combat behavior based on the combo melee system used by the Vanduul. So June, they started working on animals. They've started working on animals. Why? Because they have the system to allow the animals to function, a la the nav mesh. So, there you go. Now, this does not mean that that animals will have to be like Squadron 42 has to release before animals be added to Star Citizen. It means that once they're finished this process in Squadron 42, it will then be ported back over to Star Citizen once it's been implemented in Squadron. That may take weeks after the fact. It could take months to integrate, to get the people involved to integrate. So, all right, work continued on locomotion code. This included improving the transitions between different locomotion states by further developing the initial implementation of pose matching. They also implemented linear speed warping, including a way to dynamically calculate a spline into a specific pose. For example, the enter position of a usable. This also allows the team to make a transition between movement and interactive objects smoother and more believable. They also began on improving the fixing idle steps, which are special animations used extremely short paths, max 75 centimeters. A lot of this was put in Squadron, Star Citizen as well. For 3D navigation, the team improved the implementation of Orca 3D for collision avoidance and continued to develop brake splines. Brake splines can be dynamically attached to a systematic movement of any entity that uses 3D movement, currently ships, but will include characters in EVA in the future. The entity can then select an appropriate spline based on its skills, direction, and other conditions before smoothing its entrance, allowing it to perform cinematic movement into a systematic behavior. That's, again, almost word for word from the Star Citizen monthly report. For trolley use, the team focused on tasks to allow an NPC using a usable, in this case a movable object, to be dynamically attached to another usable, such as a parking spot. They also supported the trolley lightweight update and tweaked path following to allow it to minimize the distance of the trolley from the path, keeping it on path. On the subsumption side, multiple tool aspects were upgraded and bugs were fixed to move development into improvement stage. A new panel was also added to give an advanced selection of parameters when the drop-down menu becomes too large. So it sounds like subsumption is done? Maybe the initial pass of subsumption is done. I doubt CSU will ever be done with anything, but obviously they have to be done for Squadron at some point. But it sounds like they're at a phase where they're just like, okay, this is the subsumption we need for Squadron. Now we're just going to improve it. Like the tool, now we're going to improve it from here. So that's good. All right. Animation. Throughout June, the animation team worked on zero-G traversal, helmet usage, female Spec Ops AI, and look dev for weighted characters. Female Spec Ops AI. Sounds like Marines to me. Improvements were made to the cast locomotions, Vanduul searching, Vanduul and cockpits, sick persons. What? I'm sorry, what? Sick persons? I'm trying to grasp that in my brain. Does that mean like injured people, or does that mean like cough, cough? Okay. And ladder blockouts. Weapon-wise, progress was made on the Master at Arms and the Volt SMG and shotgun. Previs tests were done on Chapter 1's AI, while improvements were made to the reaction system to enable smoother feeling gameplay. Pre-visualization is what previs. They're currently making the final passes on several cast members' facial animations. Final passes. A lot of this is sounding like they're finishing up a lot of the aspects of the game. Now, I would not take this as the game has been finished, but it seems like there is some serious wrap-ups in certain areas of the game being done. Art characters. Character art continued to develop key outfits for the UE Navy, including a bridge officer uniform, deck crew, EVA outfit, and training gear. They also worked on armor for the Screaming Galsons, a outlaw group, and made major updates to their hair shader alongside the graphics team. Art weapons. The weapons team began this month working on a number of Volt weapons, which we saw on the Sneakily Peekly this week, including an assault light rifle, LMG, SMG, and shotgun. They also finalized their work on the Riot shield. We're getting shields! Sorry, I had to do that. While the art team worked on modeling new assets, animation worked to give life to functionality to several FPS devices, including the fire extinguisher, laser trip mine, breaching charge, and a Volt sniper rifle. A new Clausen Werner underbarrel lightweight attachment was created too. 40 mic? Is that what we're getting? Are we getting an underslung 40 mic? Oh. Seriously, Riot shields are good. They are good because in a close environment of fighting with Riot shields, it makes a lot of sense because you're going to be in small corridors for most of your fighting on spaceships. So if you have a Riot shield, it can give you some significant protection while you close the distance, which means that you can approach people and they'll have to be more careful about where they shoot. And also it means that you're going to have to fight AI with shields. So you're going to have to be more careful about doing things like using grenades to bounce them off walls and stuff like that. So it's not good for open battles and open fields, but since majority of Star Citizen's combat and probably Squadron 42's combat is going to be ship-based, it'll work very well for that. But it sounds like we're getting an underslung rail. Is it just a light attachment? Oh, it says new Clausen Werner light attachment. Oh, I got super hyped for nothing. It's just a light. Oh, well. Engine. In June, the physics team made several improvements to Ray World intersections. Okay, before we get to the engine section, I'm going to say the same disclaimer I always say. I am not an engine seer or a tech priest. I am not a Starfleet engineer. I am not I'm not been gifted by the Forerunners with the ability to understand everything mechanical. I am not an expert in anything with the engine section. I am reading the engine section out because I feel it's important that you read the entirety of the monthly reports to get everything out there. So if someone who knows the engine stuff, please let me know in the comments below what this means and if this is good or bad for Star Citizen as a whole. If you understand this. If not, feel free to listen along. There's some updates. I'll do my best to explain some of this if I can. All right. In June, the physics team made several improvements to the Ray World intersections, RWI, which now contains a semi-continuous mode to trace against rigid bodies. This makes projectile intersections tests more robust with fast-moving ships. RWI also allows significant optimizations 3 to 5 times on heavy usage. Sounds good. The tilting of dense SDFs was introduced. The entered SDS coordinate conversion and trilinear interpolation were optimized. Support for player-only collisions geometry nodes inside CGFs and CGAs was fixed and extended, while work on the new ropes continued. Various bug fixes and other improvements were submitted too. On the renderer, Gen 12 translation continued with more passes being ported over, including responsive anti-aliasing, AA, and detail rendering in the forward stage. The process of scattering queries from reworked and debug UI was added for them too. Buffer copying sun shadow cascades was ported as well. The format of previous HDR frame has been adjusted, reprojection temporal AA, to be more efficient, and the cleanup of the renderer thread began. The Gen 12 ports of atmospheric and volumetric cloud rendering continued as a generalized processing context, and new stages to decouple view-dependent resources from the core systems that operate on them have been introduced. The atmosphere shader code was adjusted to compile well with DXC and SPIR-V. Various improvements were made to prevent concurrency issues when streaming in properties of multiple planets at the same time and relaying them to the atmosphere and cloud rendering systems. Gen 12 stuff is being worked on. On the core engine, entity arenas now utilize tags to track what entities/areas events send to each other. This replaces the hidden hierarchy logic that caused various issues and allows for more efficient code. Work on running the entire code base through include what you use, IWYU, continued. The goal is to eventually make IWYU part of the continuous integration pipeline, tri-build, to keep code clean. Furthermore, a recent integration into the main development branch saw the introduction of CIG-STL and EA-STL namespace, which is planned to become the customizable STL library for Star Engine. The entity component update scheduler received updates to avoid iterating component lists when using manual update policies performance. Work on improving file locations, I/O, continued, which should eventually lead to improved loading times for small files. Also worked on improvement R_display info continued. Lastly, the old FPS analytic buckets were replaced with an array-based frame time bucket that allows for more accurate profiling information. I understood some of those words. This is effectively a copy-paste from the Star Citizen monthly report as well, because anything that's done on Squadron is done for Star Citizen. They're the same game when it comes to this kind of thing. Features. Gameplay. The Squadron 42 feature team continued their work on Character Customizer, making visibility and usability improvements alongside general polish. Further improvement and polish tasks were also completed for the Flight Academy application form. The ability to request weapon attachments from the Master at Arms was added too. Okay, so they're working on the customizer. There are also improvements. The polish tasks were completed for the Flight Academy application form. We're filling out a... Oh, right. It's in the trailer. So yeah, you get to apply. You actually... Kotaku, you're welcome. Your next article is Star Citizen Squadron 42 makes you fill out paperwork. Just give me 20% of your royalties. We'll call it even. The team also supported persistent entity streaming as recent changes caused knock-ons that affected several Squadron 42 team missions. Gameplay story. Gameplay story began in June, implementing the last of the mocap data captured at the end of April, which allowed them to complete several scenes to a high standard. It also enabled them to deliver a new scene featuring an NPC dragging a refueling hose over to the Gladius and plugging it in. Further polish work is required, but the scene is already visually interesting. Mid-June saw a new mocap session, with the team preparing to work with the data when it arrives. Towards the end of the month, maintenance and pose updates were done for several story scenes. The team also updated all bunk bed and mess hall scenes to ensure they correctly handshake with the AI. All right. That's a lot of that is just stuff that they're working on, mocap stuff, so which is good. All right, I believe a lot of this for the graphics and VFX programming in PTT is stuff that was also in Star Citizen, but we'll go through it as well. Last month, the graphics team continued porting features to Gen 12, including gas clouds, rivers, frozen oceans, refraction, and multipass support. Fixes also submitted for tessellization, partitioning for planetary ground fog. For the Vulcan backend, the team fixed issues caught by the validation layer, including mismatched texture types and mismatches of unused vertex input attributes, which are now reflected from the shader. For the rendered texture systems, the team fixed a crash caused by the wrong resolution being calculated when the screen resolution was changed, along with an issue with the RTT holograms occasionally pixelating. Bugs were also fixed with the LOD merger, including the update to allow combining objects with more than 64 submaterials. They also investigated issues with the rendering of invalid static shadow region entities. Significant progress was made on the hair shader too, including updates to the graying controls and variation tiling and melanin selection, which is all new character creator stuff, which we saw earlier there as well. Bugs, don't want to do that. VFX Programming continued to investigating offline damage maps with persistence. They also continued implementing IMGUI debug tools for damage maps and dynamic bit set data structure for damage map queries. Changes were also made to damage map materials alongside optimizations to hit processing and rendering. Level design. Last month, the FPS team moved on to 3 new chapters. 2 more in the pipeline for the coming weeks. Weeks. Okay. That's faster. Alongside other level design and system teams, the space/dogfight team continued to focus on getting a large part of the game fully playable with functioning mechanics, as well as continuing to implement all in-game scenes, conversations, breakouts, and rejoins. The social design team worked closely with the social AI to implement some of the expanded systematic content that will bring the life to levels. For example, engineers going about their daily schedules and crew on downtime in the mess hall. For those of you who, if this is your first time listening to one of these or watching one of these reviews, Squadron 42 is broken down into 3 fundamental gameplay aspects. FPS, flight, and social. Those are the 3 specific types of levels you will encounter in Squadron 42. Sometimes you'll encounter all 3 of those levels in one mission. Sometimes you'll encounter more in some missions than others. But all of them are part of the story. So you can think of it as kind of like when you go on a mission in Mass Effect, you go out on a mission and you go out into like an area where you can fight. But some of that part might be a social encounter rather than a combat encounter, and sometimes social encounters can lead to combat encounters and vice versa. But you also have, like, on your ship, you have social encounters with your crew. You can think of it like that. Social levels are designed to be social, and there are likely going to be some levels that are social that turn into combat encounters, either with space, like FPS or dogfighting, or vice versa. But those are the 3 distinct kind of encounters you will have, or 3 distinct type of gameplay you will have in the game. Social gameplay, FPS gameplay, and dogfighting gameplay. Narrative. June saw the narrative continuing to sync with design. This involves moving through the updated mission flow, assessing whether the existing lines still sell the intended story moment, and whether they provide clarity on how to properly progress. If they find a situation where existing lines don't apply, they discuss a modification or addition. These syncs will also provide the opportunity to deepen the narrative experience, be it providing a backstory for the location or its inhabitants. The team then moved onto another of the larger set-piece levels and outlined the prospective scripts and characters. Once decided, they'll generate scripts and placeholder recordings for the rest of the development team can hear and react to the content in situ. So they're working on kind of doing a review of mission flow and characters and dialogue, and then also using a larger set piece to get prospective scripts and characters for that. Narrative also developed ideas for an in-mission collectibles, so we're getting collectibles in Squadron, discussed the presentation and tone of the mission objectives, and outlined the hint system that will help lost players. Very cool. Finally, the producers from all disciplines coordinated to ensure that the remaining tasks were identified and tracked. The narrative team specifically is going to be entering in an interesting but intensive production schedule to capture any of the placeholder content that's been validated in playthroughs. Very interesting. QA. QA supported cinematics by reproducing issues found during development and chasing up outstanding bugs still causing issues for the team. General focus throughout June was on bug validation, reporting, and recording scenes for review. They also made a push for editor testing to ensure the tools used by the team are working as intended, ensuring the development workflow remains stable. Tech Animation. Tech Animation team continued wrapping up the animation pipeline refactor mentioned in last month's report. This involved creating new rigs and tools and stripping out old code for more elegant and performant solutions. They also continued to work on a new system that puts fidelity above all else. Although rarely used in gaming due to its expense and limitations, this type of system is ideal for performance pieces. This was in the Star Citizen one. I don't know exactly what this means, though I have a hint that it has to do with 3D animation. Something they use in 3D animation that they may not use in games because it costs more, maybe smoother animations, more subtle character interactions, stuff like that. Chris is all about that kind of stuff. Planning was done for the coming quarters, and numerous new character heads progressed towards animation support too. All right. UI. In the near future, UI will begin implementing more streamlined vehicle HUDs and MFDs for Squadron 42. In preparation, they finalized the new layouts and visual concepts. For the new Star Map, the team worked on navigation and began preliminary work to show space clouds. UI tech team upgraded the new 3D UI card system so that, as well as floating layered UI, they could automatically apply UI to holographic curved surfaces. This allows them to create interesting visuals that weren't possible before, which will be trialed with the new Squadron 42 exclusive Mobi-Glass and visor. That's a good example of like the difference between Squadron 42 and Star Citizen. Anything that's used in Squadron 42 on a Mobi-Glass is going to be different from the Mobi-Glass in Star Citizen, because the Mobi-Glass you use in Squadron is going to be a military Mobi-Glass. So it uses different aspects, and you don't need to have a lot of the stuff that you need in Star Citizen. So there'll be fundamentally different UI and different loadouts. You can still port them back and forth from the different games, but they'll be a little different. Chat's liking the word finalized. That doesn't necessarily mean it's completely done. It just means it's in final stages, and that could mean, there some of these like UI could have hundreds of things they have to do, but finalizing a handful of things is a good sign. VFX. Last month, VFX worked on a key cutscene involving significant amounts of destruction. Due to the extra complexity of the scene, we spent some R&D time trying different ways to convincingly animate metal structures bending and tearing, as opposed to simply shattering like in lots of real-time destruction simulations. VFX team. God bless them. I'm sure it was very, very, very hard to study how metal bends, watching explosions and such. Elsewhere, VFX Concept works on new suite of energy-based weapons, and a support was given to the art and design teams across various locations. I believe the VFX team is working on energy-based weapons, which are probably the Volt weapons, which seem to be like an electric weapon, similar to the weapons. Sort of, we have similar weapons like that right now in game. All right. That is the monthly report for June for Squadron 42. The briefest rundown is Volt weapons being worked on. Some R&D stuff for some VFX stuff. UI is setting up for completing the HUDs and MFDs for Squadron. They're also, the new star map is also working on how you can show space clouds in the star map. Working on some sort of new system that puts fidelity above all else, which is rarely used in games. QA, doing good stuff. Finalizing a lot of stuff too. There's a lot of finalizing, a lot of getting stuff done. Narrative entering a stage where they're like going through and play testing the game more often. The basic gist that I'm getting from this is Squadron is on its way towards beta. Or possibly alpha. Like a full alpha. They're reaching a point where building the game isn't the issue. It's playing the game and making it fun. That's really the takeaway I can get from June. Is that it's not that they've turned a corner, but they are turning a corner for many of the aspects of the game. Some stuff still needs to get done. Lots of stuff needs to be worked on. They're only starting to work on some of the AI skeletons for like female skeletons, but they finished up the Vandal skeletons. They're working on finishing up the human skeletons, like animations for, skeletons animations for combat. They're starting to work on fauna, animals to be roaming and working into the game. If they're already starting to work on animals, which is obviously a tertiary task, I doubt there's a mission that's dedicated to you finding an animal, and more of them being background characters or threats to your character in Squadron 42 in some cases. This is all fairly like end game sort of things you worry about at the end of your development cycle. So it looks like we're getting good progress for Squadron. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Make sure you hit that subscribe button if you haven't already done so, and hit the little bell icon to know exactly when these are brought up. We do this every month. I do them for Star Citizen and Squadron 42. The previous episode is going to be right up there for Star Citizen for this same month, if you want to take a look at that as well. And like I say every time, hope to see you someday in the black.